Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined on this Thursday morning by Andrew Erickson and by Pat Fitzmaurice. It's our starts, sits, waiver wire ads, touchdown calls. We do it all on this Thursday show every week. We're into week 6 already. It flies by. After this, we'll be a third of the way through the season, which is very hard to believe. A larger percentage of the way through the fantasy season since most leagues end a week early. Erickson, as we kind of get into now the second trimester, if you will, of the season after this week, do you have any kind of longer term thoughts looking backwards that you have from how the season started for you?
Well, I guess you can look at some of these defensive matchups and feel a little bit more confident about, okay, why am I targeting this defense? Because they're good against the run, or bad against the run, good against the pass, bad against the pass. So I do feel a little bit more confident targeting certain matchups with certain players, and also looking at these offenses, right? Which teams are identifying as we really want to throw the ball, or teams that really want to run the football. So that's kind of my macro look so far through the first 5 weeks of the season, looking at these trends with these from a team level perspective, then how that trickles down to each of the players that we're trying to start or sit in our lineups every week.
Fitz, I told you before the show that I wasn't going to ask you kind of like a macro level question here, and then I changed my mind. Do you adjust your strategy as we get into kind of this second trimester of the season?
No, not really. Like I'm just, as Erickson said, like defensive strength sort of normalizes a little bit now that we've got a body of work. You can get a better feeling for matchups. My strategies change as far as trading and like what my teams are doing. A 4-1 team I'm treating differently than a 2-3 team. But other than that, nothing really. Just it's the snow globe league, as our friend Scott Pianowski says. Like, everything is shaken up. And like 5 weeks ago, could you have imagined that the linchpins of the Kansas City Chiefs offense would be Kareem Hunt and Juju Smith-Schuster?
Yeah. Like,
things change fast in the NFL, man.
Quick reminder for everyone that all of our weekly consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. Let's start off with the guys who are the biggest waiver wire ads of the week and determine if we are starting them right away or just happy to have them on our rosters. Fitz, I'll start with you since you play a big role in our waiver wire coverage early in the week. Let's start with Tank Bigsby, somebody who a lot of people kind of wrote off for dead in terms of fantasy value coming into the season, and based on what we saw last year, coming off a great game. I didn't actually look at his game log. I have to imagine that was the best game of his career. I can't think of a better one. Are we starting or sitting Bigsby in week 6?
Yeah, just for the record, 13 carries, 101 yards, and he also had a 28-yard catch. So I've got him ranked running back 27 this week, which probably makes him a borderline start-sit guy for a lot of the people who have him and went out and spent fab money on him this week. Bigsby does seem to be building some momentum in the Jacksonville backfield, and now we have Travis Etienne dealing with some sort of shoulder issue. So there should be a pretty safe usage floor here for Bigsby, but that 28-yard catch last week, that was his second career NFL reception in 22 games. And that's kind of the concern here, that he does not really have any usage in the passing game. And that could possibly lead to a bad day if the Jaguars sort of get into an unfriendly game script, if they fall behind 2 or 3 scores, because he does not have that pass catching out, if you will, to save his day if things go wrong for the Jaguars. And, they're underdogs this week against the Bears. So that's one potential problem. I don't think the matchup is terrible. The Bears' run defense was pretty good last year, but this year so far 30th in DVOA, and they have allowed the 10th most fantasy points to running back. So there's a little bit of good here, a little bit of bad here in the outlook. He's really borderline this week as far as whether you play him.
Erickson, you've always been an ETN guy in this backfield. Bigsby obviously coming off the better game. Are you starting Tank in week 6?
I think that I agree with what Fitz said. I think he's a flex play because it's not a smash spot for him, because we don't know what the workload's going to be like. I know that he looked great last week. Then you have Doug Peterson talking about, well, we still think Travis Etienne's our guy. Remains to be seen whether that's just coach speak or whether it's because of the injury. I think that Fitz's point about the pass game usage, I think, is really scary about his floor. Because what if they do fall behind 2 touchdowns? Well, ETN's going to be in the game as the pass catcher. And then even in the game last week when ETN was on the sideline, Dearness Johnson was playing in a lot of pass down snaps because he's, I think, viewed potentially higher on the depth chart in terms of pass game usage, blocking, passes out of the backfield, 2-minute drill. So you're not getting those easy dump offs necessarily with Bigsby. You're really hoping for the big run that you've gotten with him the last couple of weeks where he's been super efficient. And again, I think that the Bears run defense definitely can be ran on. You look at running backs that they have faced this year, all 5 running backs that they've faced have gone over their running back projection. So yes, there's a path where Bigsby can be productive here, but I don't think it's a spot where you got to jam him in. It's okay. You can be patient sometimes when you get these guys off the waiver wire. You don't necessarily have to start them immediately. You kind of see how things play out. Let's see if he does have more work than Travis Etienne. And you can feel better about starting him the week next or the week after. So I agree with Fitz. I have him RB28. So right next to where Fitz has his.
Erickson, how about Tyrone Tracy, a rookie this season with the Giants, coming off the best game of his career in his first career start?
Yeah, I really like Tyrone Tracy coming in this year. I thought that he had the chance to usurp Devin Singletary as the Giants starting running back. And Singletary obviously missed the last game with an injury, a groin injury, which he's still dealing with. If Tracy or if Singletary wasn't going to play, then it'd be easy. Just lock and load Tyrone Tracy as a top 20 running back. And just that's what you do. It becomes a little bit more tricky with Singletary potentially coming back. It looks like he's going to play in this game just based on the Wednesday practice reports where he was limited. We shall see. We know that Singletary is Brian Daboll. That's his guy. He's always been his guy. But Singletary has been one of those running backs where he's the guy until they find something better. And perhaps the Giants found something better with Tyrone Tracy, which when you listen back to some of these Daboll press conferences, he's almost feeling bad that he has to play Tracy more than his guy Singletary, but he realizes how much more explosive he can add that other element to this offense. And it's the Bengals. So again, if we're looking at guys in committees, I think I'd probably rather play Tracy than Tank Bigsby if both guys have those other players in their backfield, because I feel confident that Tracy's going to be involved throughout the game. He's explosive. He's playing the Bengals. He's a pass catcher. And even when Singletary was healthy earlier this year, they were designing up looks for Tyrone Tracy in the passing game. So I would expect the Giants to be trailing in this spot. And that could mean, hey, let's get Tyrone Tracy out there because Devin Singletary is not going to help us. We're not trying to run the ball. So I think that for me, that's how I view it's similar tier, I would say, Bigsby and Tracy, but I think I would give the slight lean to Tracy, especially if Singletary obviously misses.
FantasyPros launched a Are They Playing tool a couple of weeks ago. That tool, which is powered by an AI model that we put a lot of time into, gives Devin Singletary an 88% chance of playing this week. So it does seem like it's trending in that direction. That could change depending on new practice reports and stuff Thursday and Friday. But as of right now, 88% chance to play. So we are thinking that Singletary will be back on the field. Fitz, given that we think Singletary will be back, how are you ranking Tyrone Tracy?
I've got him running back 38, and I've got Singletary running back 24. So, but Erickson's given me something to think about here, and whether I fundamentally think Tyrone Tracy has the same sort of touch outlook that we're going to get from Tank Bigsby. I'm not sure about that. I just we're in kind of a new territory here with Tracy having the breakout game last week, and now after Singletary was kind of this low-key workhorse in the opening weeks of the season, now it's probably going to be a two-man backfield going forward, as it should be. I mean, Tracy looked so good last week. Here is a hyper-athletic dude with 4.8 speed and just 96th percentile burst score, 90, or maybe it was agility score, 93rd percentile burst score, according to playerprofiler.com, and a pass catching background. I mean, and that's the crazy thing. He was a college wide receiver at Iowa for 4 years and then transferred to Purdue, switched to running back. For a guy who's only been playing running back a couple of years, he looked really decisive and just very certain about what he was doing on his runs last week. I just thought he looked so good. Broke some tackles, had 47 rushing yards over expected last week per Next Gen Stats, which is just a terrific number. So, and by the way, Eric Gray lost a fumble on the 1 yard line. So I don't think we're going to be seeing much of Eric Gray moving forward. I hope that Tyrone Tracy has carved out a firm role in this backfield, but I'm not quite ready to trust it yet with the ranking. So I'd sort of err towards sitting him this week. But man, I really do want to see more of Tyrone Tracy.
Let's quickly hit on one more wide receiver. Josh Downs. Fitz, are you starting him coming off of a big game?
Yeah, a lot of moving parts here. I mean, I have him ranked wide receiver 32 as of now, but and it does look like Michael Pittman is going to miss this week's game with a back injury. That certainly enhances the target outlook for Downs, but Downs is dealing with a toe issue, missed practice on Wednesday. We don't know what's going on at quarterback yet. Anthony Richardson practiced in a limited capacity on Wednesday. I certainly like Downs more if Joe Flacco is playing. I'll probably bump down Downs a little bit in the rankings if it is in fact Richardson. And look, the Colts are going to throw less if Anthony Richardson is a quarterback, and Downs needs target and reception volume because he is averaging 8.7 yards per catch. His average depth of target is 6 yards, and he has scored 3 touchdowns in 20 career games. Like, he is all about volume, and I worry about what sort of volume he gets if it's Richardson instead of Flacco.
The Are They Playing tool has Anthony Richardson at 79% chance to play right now. Josh Downs at 57% chance. I think Erickson, if Downs is playing and Flacco is starting, then Downs is like a borderline no-brainer, especially with the Pittman injury. He's just going to get so much volume, like very clearly in starting range. And like, you would have to have some real studs for me to want to go away from him if that's the scenario. If that's not the scenario, if it is Anthony Richardson, that to me is where it becomes more of a question mark. How are you ranking Downs this week?
Same range as Fitz in that wide receiver 3 range. The floor is there with the volume. I think with Pittman not going to play, but I think Richardson's going to play this week. And the will they play tool kind of agrees with that. He's already doing more in practice than he did last week. He's throwing more practice, and he's their guy. Whether it's not about winning games right now for the Colts, it's Anthony Richardson, our quarterback of the future. So I think that he's going to play in this game, and unfortunately that hurts Josh Downs, even though with Pittman out, it seems like he'd be slated to smash. Not necessarily the case. So I think you have to adjust expectations. You're not going to see what we saw last week, especially defensively, right? Last week they played the Jaguars. That was the perfect matchup for Joe Flacco to rip that secondary to shreds. Titans defense coming off a bye week. Titans defense has been really good this year, especially against the pass. So I think you're going to see less production. I think this Colts offense might struggle. A lot of their guys are banged up. Trey Sermon also banged up. And Josh Downs himself is also dealing with a toe injury, like Fitz said. So I think that if we get Richardson as quarterback, I think I'd be trying to look for alternatives to Josh Downs. Can
I give Erickson an either or from this game? Would you rather start Josh Downs or Calvin Ridley?
I'm starting Calvin Ridley. I would start Calvin. If it's not Joe Flacco, because I would start Calvin Ridley. You're the one that a couple weeks ago, George Pickens against these Colts outside cornerbacks, they can't cover. And so Calvin Ridley, you hear Brian Callahan talking about, we got to get Calvin Ridley the ball more. The squeaky wheel remains undefeated so far this season. So I'm going to go with Ridley.
What would you do, Fitz?
Yeah, so as of now, I've got Downs ranked higher. But as I mentioned, if it's Richardson, I am dropping Downs in the rankings. So yeah, I would start Ridley too.
We've got some more player versus player debates, but first, I want you guys to plant your flags on a couple of guys. Fitz, who is your plant your flag player for week 6 that you just really believe in?
It's Javonte Williams, and he fell out of the good graces of fantasy managers when he had 23 or fewer rushing yards in each of his first 3 games, but he did go up against 3 pretty good run defenses to open the season. Seahawks, Steelers, Buccaneers, all of whom are ranked in the top 10 against the run in terms of DVOA. Things have gotten better the last 2 weeks. Javonte's had 18 touches each of the last 2 weeks, 80 yards from scrimmage in week 4, and then 111 yards from scrimmage last week. Javonte is on pace for 58 catches, and I think there's like 70 reception upside here as the primary back in a Sean Payton offense. And we know Sean Payton offenses always involve the running backs in the passing game. Play him against the Chargers this week. Not an easy matchup, but Javonte is going to get plenty of touches, and his dual run catch ability gives him multiple pass to fantasy value.
I believe Javonte was your first plant your flag player.
He was week 1. So that didn't pan out too well. I'm looking for revenge here. If I go 0 for 2, I am going to have to, spurn Javonte Williams for good.
You're going back to the well. Erickson is going to the Dell for his plant your flag player. Who you got, Erickson?
Worm did that. We're talking all tanks here on today's show. Tank Dell This is the time, baby. Tank Dell has done absolutely nothing so far this season. Maybe it's an after effects from the injuries he was dealing with in the offseason, but this is his time. Nico Collins was placed on injured reserve this week. He's not going to be part of this matchup. You look at the Texans offense going against this Patriots defense. Christian Gonzalez. He's their star cornerback that they put on the opposing offense's number one wide receiver. The Patriots know about Stephon Diggs. They're pretty familiar with what this guy can do against their defense, and he has terrorized the Patriots defense the last couple seasons. So I think that Gonzalez is going to go and match more up on Stephon Diggs, which is going to open up all the opportunities and targets for Tank Dell in this matchup. One game last year where Nico Collins missed and Tank Dell was still healthy, he had 14 targets in that game. When CJ Stroud talks about Tank Dell, he doesn't say that he's one of the best receivers on the team. He says he's one of the best receivers in the league every single time that he talks about Tank Dell. So I know that it's been bad up to this point, but I think that all the pathways are kind of clearing here for Tank Dell to have a monster game against a Patriots defense that honestly has been really overrated. They've given up 300 yards in 3 of their 5 games this season. I know they're playing at home. Drake May's playing. Can't wait. It's going to be great. But I think that Tank Dell is going to have a big game here. So if I have him, I've been holding him on my roster, being patient. I think I'm going to be trying to start him this week.
Where are you ranking Dell, Fitz?
I have got Dell ranked wide receiver 28.
This roller coaster of an NFL season is moving right along, and it promises to be a month full of tricks, treats, and of course, touchdowns. And DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is the number one place to bet touchdowns, running it in from the 1 or an 80-yard bomb. We don't care how they score touchdowns. We just want to bet on them. DraftKings heard us and is delivering. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score a touchdown. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. We've got 2 matchups with totals over 50 points this week, both Dallas-Detroit and also the DMV battle between Baltimore and Washington. Both games look terrific, with the Lions laying a field goal. The Ravens are laying 6.5 points. Lines and odds subject to change, of course. But one thing for sure is we are definitely getting some touchdowns in those matchups. Here's a reason for new customers to do a touchdown dance of their own. Bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the number one place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, guys, let's get into some player debates. We're going to start with the running backs, as we always do, and we're going to start with J.K. Dobbins going up against Chase Brown. Erickson, who do you prefer here?
Well, Zach Moss opened up this week with a DNP, so we could be looking at Chase Brown, full workload season. I'm going to go with Chase Brown if we get more reports about Zach Moss not being fully back from this ankle injury. I think these guys are close. They're closely ranked in my rankings. I do have Dobbins slightly ahead, but that's with the impression that Moss plays. But if he continues to miss practices, I'm going to load up Chase Brown against the New York Giants Sunday Night Football. I know I'm going to be watching. Fitz is going to be watching. Our Illinois workhorse blossoming before us. Let's go Chase Brown.
Moss is at 47% on the Are They Playing tool, for the record.
Point flip.
I'm going to take the under on 47% because the Twitter injury docs I trust think that Zach Moss probably has a high ankle sprain, which suggests we're not going to see him not only this week, but probably for a couple weeks down the road. And yes, Chase Brown finally gets his chance to be the workhorse running back we've wanted him to be for the Bengals. And look, Chase Brown has objectively been better than Zach Moss this season by pretty much any measure. Brown has just looked fantastic this year. 5.6 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns already in a secondary role. The Bengals have scored 33, 34, and 38 points over the last 3 weeks and have averaged 417 yards of offense per game during that stretch. This offense is absolutely on fire. And he gets the Giants this week, not a pushover run defense by any means, like no defense that has Dexter Lawrence or sitting in the middle of the defensive line is going to be easy to run against. But man, Chase Brown is the lead back in this offense. Top 10 running back for me. Running back 9. I've Dobbins running back 18. Appealing role, and he's looked good this year, but the matchup isn't great. Denver defense, 6th in DVOA against the run, 10th fewest fantasy points to opposing running backs, and Chargers don't exactly have an explosive offense. They've scored 10 points in each of their last 2 games. Broncos-Chargers has a Vegas total of 35.5. Give me the guy in the high-powered offense with the featured role.
They are coming off the bye, the Chargers, obviously. I was going to bring up Dobbins because you guys mostly focused on Chase Brown when answering, which is fine because I think he is a very exciting start. But what do we make of Dobbins, Erickson? I mean, he's had 2 really strong matchups and he was awesome in them. And he had 2 really tough matchups and he wasn't good in them. Denver, seems like it's leading more on the tough matchup side. How are you ranking Dobbins specifically?
I think that he's still a decent RB2 play. I know you pointed out the 2 bad games that he's coming off, but those were the games where he had the best and most encouraging usage for us to kind of project him forward, where he was out snapping and out carrying Gus Edwards. It's funny because he probably would have been doing the same things if he wasn't just ripping off massive runs through the first 2 weeks, but that's just kind of how things work. When you score an 80-yard rushing touchdown, you just don't get as many touches because you already scored the touchdown. So I think that the outlook is really good for J.K. Dobbins, and he's fully healthy. He's ready to go. I think the matchup is obviously tough. Denver has been one of those defenses that we're circling as a matchup to avoid, essentially as both a run defense and pass defense. And we still don't know exactly what the state of the Chargers offensive tackles are. So I think that matters as well. But for me, I think that he's still an RB2 play just because the Chargers offense is still kind of a work in progress, but he looks like he is the bell cow, at least moving forward.
Fitz, how about Rico Dowdle versus Jerome Ford this week?
Dowdle, undisputed lead back in a pretty good offense. Dowdle had a season high 22 touches against a pretty good Pittsburgh defense last week. 20 carries for 87 yards, 2 catches for 27 and a touchdown. He's up against a good Detroit run defense, but we like that he's also getting usage in the passing game because that gives him multiple outs this week. As for Jerome Ford, I just don't want to use any Browns if I don't have to. The Cleveland offense just generated 13 points and 212 yards against the Washington Commanders defense. The Washington Commanders. So plus Nick Chubb back in practice. Kind of doubt he's going to be activated this week, but Ford's time as a lead back probably running out. Like, he doesn't have much time left. Man, I don't want to play the Browns. So yeah, give me Rico Dowdle here.
Erickson, what do you think?
I think both guys are used in the passing game, but when you look at everything else that works in Dowdle's favor, it doesn't work in Ford's favor. He doesn't have the goal line role. They take him out and put Deontay Foreman in if they ever get to the goal line. Whereas Rico Dowdle looks like that player as long as he doesn't fumble again like he did on Sunday night when Dak was able to recover the ball. So as long as he doesn't do that again, Rico has the most touchdown upside. He's playing in a projected shootout. Dallas is home underdogs, which is kind of a weird spot for them to be in, but they are playing at home. And that's traditionally where they play at their best. And last week was a tough matchup for Rico Dowdle on the ground, and he got there. It took 20 carries, but he got there eventually. So I think it's Dowdle for sure.
Let's go to some wide receivers then. How about Chris Olave going up against Christian Kirk in my debate here? Erickson, I'll start with you this time.
Well, Spencer Rattler's already come out and said that he's going to feed Chris Olave. So Chris Olave managers need that after last week when Derek Carr decided to never throw the ball to Chris Olave. So for me, I'm just not excited about Christian Kirk in this Jaguars offense. Brian Thomas is the guy. Like, that's the guy who I think is really taking over this Jaguars passing game. Evan Ingram, maybe he's coming back. I think that he's coming back. Doug Peterson thinks he's coming back. The Will They Play tool thinks that he's going to come back. So I think that hurts Kirk as that potential underneath target, where that's when he's been at his best. And even this year, he really hasn't been in that role. So he's seeing more vertical targets, which we don't necessarily like because I don't think that fits his skill set the best. He's better as that underneath option. And Evan Ingram coming back, I don't think helps his target share in this particular matchup against the Bears defense that's been pretty solid. So I don't love Christian Kirk and Olave. Yes, the quarterback question marks are obviously the biggest concern, but I think that he's going to get volume here. His only other main competition for targets is Rashid Shaheed. So it's just 2 guys that you really need to feed here. Negative game script. They're playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Buccaneers the Buccaneers are a run defense, right? That's what they're best at. So they're going to be trailing. They're going to have to throw the ball. So I think Olave is going to get more volume, and I'm just going to buy into he's a talented guy. The rookie quarterback is scary, but I think Olave can make enough plays because he's good enough.
There's a decent gap. Chris Olave is well ahead of Christian Kirk in the expert consensus rankings from guys across the industry in half PPR. Olave's at wide receiver 22. Kirk's at wide receiver 34. We, amongst just the Fantasy Pros only rankings, do have that much closer. Fitz, which way are you leaning?
Chris Olave is probably my most rostered player in redraft leagues. Like, I have him everywhere. He was just sort of my go-to second round pick in so many drafts this year. And I think he's a terrific player, but I'm actually going to pick Christian Kirk here. I'm terrified by Olave being tied to a rookie quarterback making his first start, and not a first round rookie quarterback either. A guy with maybe a lesser pedigree than Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels. So, yeah, I'm worried about that. And encouraging that Rattler wants to get him the ball, but whether he will be able to actually do that, even against this Buccaneers defense that just got completely firebombed by the Atlanta Falcons in week 5, sort of remains to be seen. And I agree with Erickson that Brian Thomas is quickly taking over as the alpha receiver for the Jaguars, but Christian Kirk has very quietly been the wide receiver 17 in PPR scoring over the last 3 weeks, 15.9 fantasy points a game over that stretch. So with the Jaguars passing game starting to show at least a little bit of life, give me Christian Kirk tied to the now veteran quarterback Trevor Lawrence versus Chris Olave trying to get fed by a rookie quarterback making his NFL debut.
Erickson, what are your expectations for Spencer Rattler, by the way? Like, I know he mentioned, and you mentioned this, wanting to feed Olave, but just in general as a player, do you think he's going to be the type of quarterback who can support a quality fantasy receiver?
Well, we did see him in college support Xavier Legette, who ended up being a first-round pick, and kind of his breakout year coincided with Spencer Rattler. So when I was looking back at my notes about Spencer Rattler, and I know that D-Bro was definitely one of the bigger advocates for Spencer Rattler, so I think he can probably give a better breakdown of Rattler, but at least from my notes, I thought that he threw a very catchable ball. I thought that he was able to put players in positions to make plays. And if anything, this Olave, what he's alluding to here is, dude, I'm just going to get the guy the ball. Like, that's all I'm going to try and do. So I think that from that perspective, that's good for fantasy purposes. And I will say as well, I was looking back at some of his numbers against the blitz, because you're playing the Buccaneers. What are they going to do? Todd Bowles is facing a rookie quarterback. What do you think he's going to do? He's going to throw blitzes that Spencer Rattler's only dreamed of seeing. But he was pretty good against the blitz in college. And I looked back at some of the other college quarterbacks and how they did against the blitz. Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels, and how they've done against the blitz so far in the NFL. They've both been pretty good. So if that carries over, then I think that we can finally maybe have some success with Spencer Rattler here against a pretty bad Buccaneers pass defense. So I'm tentatively optimistic that Olave can produce. And I mean, he's, after last week's performance, there's only way to go is up. So,
yeah. Fitz, are you starting this week Amari Cooper or Darnell Mooney?
Oh, this one is in the coin flip zone for me. I have Cooper ranked wide receiver 25 and Mooney ranked wide receiver 26. And as I mentioned before, I would love to just stay away from the Cleveland Browns offense if I can. Mike Clay of ESPN tweeted out a pretty interesting stat the other day, and it shows just how putrid Deshaun Watson has been this season. 45% of the passes thrown to Amari Cooper so far have been classified as off-target throws. So in other words, nearly half of Amari Cooper's targets have been totally uncatchable this season. And his catch rate is something like 36 or 37% this year on his targets. As bad as it's been, though, Cooper is still wide receiver 19 in PPR scoring over the last 3 weeks. And even though he's had some drops this season, he's still a really good player. I like Mooney, too. And of course, he's coming off the big showcase game against the Buccaneers, where he had 16 targets, 9 catches, 105 yards to 2 touchdowns. But Cousins hoisted up 58 pass attempts in that game. And that's just not going to be the normal pass volume for the Atlanta Falcons. Good news is that Mooney's drawn no fewer than 6 targets in any of his last 4 games. So 2 pretty solid options. I guess I'm going with the trusted name brand in Amari Cooper.
Did I hear you right that you said you had Cooper wide receiver 25 and Darnell Mooney wide receiver 26 this week? That's exactly where each of them is in ECR as well. Cooper is wide receiver 25. Mooney is wide receiver 26. So you are exactly aligned with consensus there. Erickson, how do you see it?
I'm going to take Fitz's advice he gave earlier in the show and not start Browns players. That's what I'm going to do here. I'm Fitz. I'm taking your advice. I'm not starting Amari Cooper. Look, this is the ride, man. It's a roller coaster with Amari Cooper. He's up and down. He's going to finish with 1,000 yards, whether he's on the Browns or a new team. We don't know. It's going to happen at some point. But I just think that Mooney, they're playing the Carolina Panthers. They can't stop anything on defense. So you could take the risk on Cooper, maybe finally converting on some of these opportunities, or you could just take an advantage with Darnell Mooney, who's looked good, played well in this offense. It hasn't been just one game that he's had, even before this blow-up game in week 5. He had some other decent games aside from week 1. So I like Darnell Mooney here. I want to ride the hot team with the Atlanta Falcons and fade this Browns team that looks like it's going into just, is this Deshaun Watson's last game? Is he gonna get, we're gonna see him get pulled in this game, and Jameis Winston's gonna throw an 80-yard bomb to Amari Cooper. And that's why I'm gonna be wrong when we talk about this next week. But I'm gonna say that the process was right. I'm gonna go with Mooney.
Guys, low testosterone affects about 30% of adult men in America. Are you feeling the drag of fatigue, noticing a dip in muscle mass, or sensing a slump in libido? If so, it's time to get your testosterone levels tested. If you have low T, Kysotrex is an FDA-approved pill that's changing the game in testosterone replacement therapy. In fact, Kysotrex restored testosterone levels in nearly 9 out of 10 clinical study participants, and its unique formulation bypasses the liver to avoid liver damage. It's time to break free from injections, pellets, and gels. Choose Kysotrex and take a step toward being the hero of your life again. To see if you qualify, visit Kysotrex.com and take the low T quiz today. That's KYZATREX.com. By prescription only. Kysotrex is a controlled substance. It can be a target of abuse. Kysotrex is not for use in pregnant women or men with prostate or breast cancer. Safety and efficacy in those younger than 18 is not known. Tell your doctor about all medical conditions and medications. Serious side effects could include increased blood pressure, worsening prostate symptoms, increased risk of prostate cancer, blood clots in the legs or lungs, decreased sperm count, liver problems, enlarged or painful breasts, and breathing problems while you sleep. Common side effects include swelling of the ankles, feet, or body, increased red blood cell count, and increase in prostate-specific antigen or PSA levels. PSA is a test used to detect prostate cancer. Report these symptoms to your doctor. Call your doctor to learn more about Kysotrex. For questions or more information, visit www.kysotrex.com or call 1-833-949-5040. All right, guys, we'll move into some more rapid-fire start-sit decisions. At running back, Bucky Irving or Austin Ekeler this week, Erickson?
I'm going to go with Bucky. I like this matchup for the Buccaneers playing against the Saints, led by Spencer Rattler. We saw the Saints defense get run over, I would say, by Kareem Hunt, a guy that came off the couch a couple weeks ago. He had a productive game running against this defense. They're coming off a short week. The Buccaneers are coming off extra rest playing on Thursday, so I think they're going to be able to get the run game going here. You have the part 13, Marshawn Lattimore versus Mike Evans, so maybe he's not as heavily involved, so I think maybe we see the Buccaneers run the ball effectively. So I will say it would be Ekeler if we get more news about Brian Robinson not being available, so that would shift my vote towards Ekeler, but for right now, I'm going to go with Bucky.
I do think, Fitz, I'm curious how you have this ranked. I do think of Robinson and Ekeler. Like, Robinson is better, and I would obviously rather start him, assuming health, just given everything we've seen. Ekeler is probably the type of player more likely to do damage against this Ravens run defense. Robinson is the type of player that I think might struggle. Now, with Jaden Daniels a quarterback, it's very easy to run regardless, so I wouldn't be surprised if Robinson had a big day in this game. I'm kind of expecting everybody in this game to have big days, but if I'm looking at them in a vacuum against this Ravens defense, I'm thinking Ekeler might be the guy that they can use a bit more. What do you think about this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good assessment, Worm. It is hard to just run conventionally against the Ravens, although maybe it will help that Jaden Daniels has that mobility factor and the Ravens defense has to honor that. Sometimes that can freeze linebackers for that extra split second, make life easier for the running back. Agree with you that the outlook, it seems like a better matchup for Ekeler, but I do think the touch outlook is probably better for Bucky. I agree with pretty much everything Erickson said. It seems like with Spencer Rattler getting his first start, this is going to be a run-friendly game script for the Buccaneers. They're not going to get trucked in this game. They will be able to run the ball. Should mean Bucky, and Rachaad White is dealing with some sort of foot issue, which could mean a spike in his workload. But as Erickson said, if Brian Robinson winds up sitting, he didn't practice Wednesday. He also didn't practice Wednesday last week and wound up playing. But if for some reason he were to sit, then Austin Ekeler becomes a pretty easy call and would become a top 20 running back for me this week.
Are they playing Tool has Robinson at 37% for the record? That's just through the Wednesday practice reports, so subject to change. But as of right now, not feeling very confident there. We're going to talk more about that Ravens Commanders matchup on our Friday Key Questions show, Fitz. But I wonder too, like the Ravens, who has seen a mobile quarterback more than the Ravens defense in practice all these years? So maybe they're a little better prepared for. I'm really fascinated for that one. Let's look at another wide receiver.
You refer to that.
Go ahead.
You refer to that as the DMV matchup. Is that DC, Maryland, Virginia? Is that why they call it that?
Yeah, so there's actually for local folks, there's some debate about what counts. Like some people say that the D is like Delaware, Maryland, Virginia. It's the 3 states. Some people call it DC. Some people call it like I think they refer to like various counties in the area or specific towns. I think of it's most colloquially used as the DC and then the surrounding area in Virginia and Maryland. That could extend down to like Southern Virginia, like the Tidewater area. It could extend up to Delaware. But yeah, that Maryland Virginia battle. I forgot that I was on a show with people who aren't from the area. But yes,
I was going to say
the DMV.
The DMV reference, I thought Department of Motor Vehicles. I thought you were expecting a slow-paced game from Ravens Commanders. No. I'm expecting a lot of scoring here, like up and down the field. I'm glad you brought
it up so I could clarify. No, DMV is a geographical location. It's up to some interpretation and debate what exactly it encompasses, but it's the DC, Maryland, Virginia area in general. So yes, this is a battle of the DMV.
You're a Ravens fan?
Yeah, I didn't even say I was a Ravens fan, okay? But I am from the area, as people definitely know. And you can see the Maryland, tiki thing behind me if you're watching on YouTube in my background. So, yeah, no surprise there. I do think that game's going to be awesome, by the way. That's easily the game of the week for me. I understand that CBS protected it, which is why it wasn't flexed into Sunday Night Football, but I wish that was a primetime game. I think Lamar versus Jane Daniels is going to be freaking fantastic. Let's go to a wide receiver debate here. Dontayvion Wicks, who let a lot of people down this week, going up in this debate against Rashid Shaheed. Fitz, what do you think?
Wicks, here? Same reason I'm kind of fading Olave. I'm also fading Shaheed. Plus, Shaheed is dealing with some sort of hip issue. Missed practice Wednesday. Wicks' target outlook is kind of uncertain this week because we don't know what the status is as of this recording for Romeo Dobbs, who had that 1-game suspension for going AWOL last week from practice, and Christian Watson, who actually has returned to practice less than 2 weeks after what we thought was, sprained MCL. So he's back already. But this Packers matchup against the Cardinals, pretty good, and I would much rather ride with the healthy wide receiver tied to Jordan Love than the not completely healthy wide receiver tied to a rookie quarterback making his first NFL start.
Is this an easy one for you too, Erickson, or are you considering Shaheed?
Only if Christian Watson plays, then I think I'm going to go with Shaheed because I just know that he's going to run all the routes, get all the snaps, his main target is Olave, where if you're now throwing Watson and Dobbs back into the mix, I have no idea. We were never considering starting Wicks when both those guys were healthy, right? So why would I change my tune now, I guess? I know last week obviously happened, but I would be hesitant just because I'm not sure what the target volume is going to look like. So I would still roll the dice with Shaheed. And again, going back to Shaheed, when his big games happen, again, this is irrelevant from quarterback play. It's against teams that run a lot of zone coverage. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers lead the NFL in zone coverage. So again, for what it's worth.
Let's look at some flex decisions here. Erickson, I'll start with you. How about Wan'Dale Robinson versus Tank Bigsby, who we talked about earlier?
I'm going to just take the points with Wan'Dale Robinson. He has at least 9 half PPR points in every single game this season. We're still not 100% sure what the status of Malik Neighbors is. It seems like he's trending in the right direction, but this concussion happened more than a week ago, and it's still kind of keeping him out of practice fully, so that's concerning for me. But Robinson, he's a target machine. He's been a target machine even when Neighbors has been healthy, and he's playing the Bengals. So negative game script, a ton of volume coming Wan'Dale's way. We know that he's going to lead the team in targets. So even if Neighbors comes back, he's going to see a decent amount of volume. So I think I'd rather just lock in the points with Wan'Dale than take the risk with Bigsby. If they use ETN a little bit more, they don't use Bigsby enough. Weird things happen in London all the time in these London games. So I would just take Robinson at this point.
Fitz, which side do you take?
Wan'Dale. I mean, he is averaging 6.4 receptions a game. And Granted, Wan'Dale is sort of the Taco Bell of wide receivers. Like, you get a lot of food for not a lot of money. But there's also not a lot of nutritional value here. 7.2 yards per catch, 4 touchdowns in 22 career games for Wan'Dale. So not a lot of big play potential here. He's not going to accrue points in big chunks. But the reception volume just gives him such a sturdy floor. And I think it is sturdier than Tank's Bigsby's floor, basically. So, yeah, I mean, whether Malik Neighbors plays or not, pretty solid basement here for Wan'Dale.
Let's bring up another guy that we talked about in the waiver wire segment, Tyrone Tracy versus Lad McConkey. And I think this one will probably depend on, what we actually end up seeing with Devin Singletary. But as of now, do you guys expect to be playing Tracy or Lad if you have to make that decision, Fitz?
Lad, simply because I do expect Singletary to play. If Singletary is out, then Tracy becomes an easy call. But the setup for Lad looks pretty good this week, I think, if the Broncos have Patrick Surtain following Quentin Johnston around. Like, that would leave Lad to work on Broncos slot corner Jaquin McMillan. Pretty good matchup for Lad, and Justin Herbert might wind up just peppering McConkey with targets this week.
I'm really curious to see how they use Lad coming off the bye. We often see rookie wide receivers, especially talented ones that we believe in, kind of take a step forward after their team's bye. Now, the bye came really early in the season this year for the Chargers, so we'll see if that plays out like it has in the past for other guys. But I typically really like talented rookie receivers paired with good quarterbacks coming off the bye week. It's also a tough defensive matchup, as you laid out, but maybe less tough if Surtain is focused elsewhere. So I'm really just more intrigued by whatever we see out of Lad this week than anything else. Erickson, who do you like here, Tracy or Lad?
It's Lad for me. Same for all the same reasons Fitz laid out, so I co-sign.
Another flex decision here, Jalen Tolbert or Trey Sermon. What do you think, Erickson?
I think I'm going to chase the ceiling with Jalen Tolbert here. Look, he showed up big last week for the Dallas Cowboys, kind of filling in that Brandon Cooks role. We have a potential shootout at home against the Detroit Lions. I think that he has the higher ceiling. Sermon, again, another Colts player that's dealing with an injury. He was in a committee of sorts still last week with Tyler Goodson. He had a lot of production come in the passing game, which if you get Richardson under center, those targets are not going to be there anymore. So he did score, which is always going to be in his range of outcomes. So I think that he probably has higher touchdown upside. But I think Tolbert, man, he's been productive the last couple of weeks, and without Cooks in the fold, it looks like he is a big part, or he has a higher floor in this offense than he did previously. So I think if I'm shooting for the moon here, I'm going to go with Jalen Tolbert.
Fitz?
Tolbert is definitely an intriguing option against a pass funnel Lions defense. It's much better against the run than it is against the pass. But I'm going to go with Sermon and the relatively safer touch floor you get with him against the Titans. This is, of course, assuming that Jonathan Taylor is out.
How about Alec Pierce versus Roschon Johnson, Fitz?
Pretty easy one for me. Like, it's Alec Pierce. Obviously not a safe play because he only has 13 catches in 5 games. But this dude just makes big plays, man. 28.3 yards per catch right now. 21.6 yards per target. Of all the Colts pass catchers, I think Pierce's value probably drops the least if it's Anthony Richardson instead of Joe Flacco, just because we have seen how far Richardson can fling the ball downfield. And Pierce is the guy to run and go get it for Richardson. So not that great a matchup for Roschon against a pretty good Jags run defense. And he's the clear number 2 running back behind DeAndre Swift. Yeah, there's some touchdown upside there because it seems like the Bears are willing to use him on the goal line, but he hasn't had more than 10 carries in any game this season and just doesn't add much value as a pass catcher.
Erickson, Pierce, or Roschon?
Yeah, this one was tough because it's betting on, all right, is Alec Pierce just going to catch an absolute rocket from Anthony Richardson for a touchdown, or the Bears going to get stopped at the 1 and then give the ball to Roschon for a touchdown? So I was on the fence for this one, so I'm glad that you threw it to Fitz first because I really wanted to see what he had to say. And yeah, I'll take Alec Pierce too, because I liked Fitz's reasons more than I liked trying to back Roschon and hoping that he finds the end zone. We know that Pierce will get a shot. We know that he's at least going to get a deep target that could be an 80-yard touchdown. And if he gets 0 points and he just doesn't come up with that catch, oh well, Roschon Johnson probably didn't do much better.
Let's look at a quarterback debate. Erickson, how about Jared Goff versus Caleb Williams coming off one of the best starts of his young career?
I'm just going to go with Jared Goff. I like the environment more in this matchup. I think that the negative outlook with Goff would be, well, the Lions scored all their touchdowns on the ground and Jared Goff doesn't throw for any touchdowns. That's how I kind of see him failing in this scenario. But I mean, if the Lions score 30 points, I think that's a good process of, hey, I started the quarterback in a team that scored 30 points. Whereas with Caleb Williams, yes, I know it's the Jaguars defense. It's horrible, but I have concerns about this team just going across, playing London. Weird things happen there. There's a lot of unders that happen in London. It's just weird game environments, whereas I feel much better about the projected game script with a Dallas and Detroit game in a dome with two offenses that can put up points. So I'm just going to go with Jared Goff.
Yeah, Lions Cowboys does feel like a shootout, but like the Lions can participate in a shootout, giving touches to their running backs, and particularly against this Dallas defense that is so poor against the run, which is why I'm like even considering sitting a quarterback in this matchup, even if it's somebody who's pretty good in Goff, who's playing in a dome and who we expect a lot of scoring from. I just could see the Lions saying, hey, the way to take advantage of this defense is like, let's just run with Gibbs and Montgomery 40 times and call it a day. Fitz, how do you see this one?
Yeah, so if I had told you guys 5 weeks ago that the Lions, 4 games into their season, would have gotten nearly 300 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns from Jameson Williams, wouldn't you have thought to yourselves, I've got to draft Jameson Williams and I should probably draft Jared Goff in all my leagues too, right? I mean, you'd think with JMO having this breakout, Goff would be crushing it. Goff is QB 17 right now in fantasy points per game. And part of that is because the Lions are good. They're 3-1. And in the 3 wins, Goff is averaging 23 pass attempts. So Erickson talks about this like a pretty good game script for Jared Goff. I'm not so sure because the Lions are favored in this game. And, you know, what if they win this game pretty easily? Maybe Goff does not get the sort of pass volume we're hoping for. So give me Caleb Williams at, coming off the best game of his short career and going against a defense that has allowed the most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks, 23.1 fantasy points per game the Jaguars are giving up to QBs.
Let's stick with this Lions game for our tight end question. I can't believe that I'm even having to suggest him as, are you going to start Sam Laporta? But the way he's played this year, you have to ask Sam Laporta or Tucker Kraft. They're back-to-back in ECR. They're both top 6 options, but I think it's totally plausible that there are managers out there who got Laporta as the first tight end off the board and said, well, I better get some kind of backup. And they happen to pick Tucker Kraft. And now Kraft has looked really good. Laporta hasn't. They're coming off the bye. Maybe they find a way to get, Laporta a bit more usage now for Detroit coming off of that bye week. But I find this to be a really fascinating decision, not only just trying to weigh which guy I would want to start, but the fact that it even has become a decision at all just a month plus into the season. So Fitz, Sam Laporta or Tucker Kraft? Who do you like?
Kraft is now tight end 3 in fantasy scoring behind Brock Bowers and George Kittle, and he is right on Kittle's rear bumper in that chase. So I still have to go with Laporta, though. A slow start this year, but the body of work that he compiled in 2023 is still pretty compelling. So I'm gonna stick with Laporta.
Erickson?
I'm taking Tucker Kraft. You find a hot tight end, you stay with him. Don't get out of the flames. This is good thing bit you in the butt. Let's keep it up. Tucker Kraft for me.
So you're sticking with Kraft because he's hot. Are you expecting Laporta to start looking better sometime soon, or are you nervous about him?
It depends on the touchdowns, right? This is why you guys don't like Jared Goff, because they're just rushing for all these touchdowns. If they decide, hey, let's use Sam Laporta more in the red zone, he only has 2 red zone targets. Remember last year, he was the touchdown machine. So I think you're seeing a correlation. Well, Jared Goff's not scoring as many fantasy points because Sam Laporta is not scoring as many fantasy points because his production is related to those touchdowns, which obviously drives scoring with quarterbacks. So right now, I mean, he's a 10% target share this season. That's not good. Kraft's is 13%. So Kraft's seeing more targets. Kraft's seeing more red zone targets, which you care about a lot more. And with all the ambiguity about the Green Bay Packers wide receivers, we're confident that who's the tight end 1? Is Tucker Kraft, and Jordan Love looks for him a lot in the red zone, which has not been the case this year with Sam Laporta. So Kraft for me.
Say goodbye to start-sit dilemmas with Fantasy Pros Start-Sit Assistant. Within seconds, you'll know exactly who to play for optimal results each and every week. Leveraging insights from numerous experts, the Start-Sit Assistant aligns your lineup decisions with the top minds in fantasy football, giving you a competitive edge. Maximize your lineup's potential with just a few clicks. Head to fantasypros.com/myplaybook and make winning decisions in no time. All right, guys, let's do our touchdown calls contest this week. It'll be Fitz on running back, myself on wide receiver, and Erickson on the gross tight end position. Fitz, let's start with you.
Oh, it's Chase Brown, of course. I mean, as Erickson said so eloquently earlier in the show, it's Chase Brown season.
Yes. At wide receiver, I'm going Zay Flowers going up against that Commanders defense. Plus, Lamar threw a lot of touchdowns last week. None of them went to Flowers. I think that he gets one this week in this juicy matchup. Erickson, who are you taking at tight end?
Well, I was going to put Mark Andrews, but there's no way that he's ever going to catch touchdowns. So I'm going to go with the other tight end playing in that game, in the, what do you call it, the DMV game?
Yes.
Zach Ertz for me. He had 8 targets last week for a 30% target share. He had 2 catches for 10 yards. Not great, but he had 4 targets in the red zone. He had 70 air yards. Look, Baltimore ranks second in yards, receptions, targets allowed to tight ends this season. So in a game where I project to be a lot of scoring, maybe the Commanders have to throw the ball a little bit more because they're going to be in a negative game script. Zach Ertz is out there. Yeah, maybe he falls in the end zone. So that's what I'm hoping on. Let's go with Zach Ertz, a tight end.
Want to let everybody know before we get out of here, we've got a special offer for everyone. Unlock a month of Betting Pros Premium for free. Download the Betting Pros app today. Use promo code FPFREE. That's FP-free. Get access to tools like the same game parlay tool, the prop bet analyzer, and the prize picks prop bet cheat sheet. Don't miss out. Try it for free 1 month now. Only available on iOS. Again, that's FP-free is the code. All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this week's Thursday show. For Fitz and Erickson, I'm Ryan Wormeli. We'll see y'all again next week, and good luck in week 6.